So was the Nicene Creed truth or simply Roman politics? Hey guys, it's John sitting here in my studio with a fabulous mug of coffee. I love my Sunday morning time with you guys. You know, every Sunday Catholics go to the church and they do the Catholic calisthenics of sit, stand, and kneel, and then they recite the Nicene Creed. And they recite it as if it came straight from Jesus himself. But this creed was not born from Joshua's mouth. It was born from imperial politics and was not even invented until the 4th century. You know, today, let's talk about this story of how bishops and emperors shaped what millions of Catholics believe worldwide. And let's do a little critical thinking about just timing. In 325 AD, the Council of Nicaea was convened. And what Constantine was doing was he was bringing all the bishops together to unify Christianity under one banner. But let's talk about that for a second. He was unifying Christianity. He was not unifying Catholicism. He was unifying Christianity. You have to realize that Constantine was also the guy who made Christianity legal. So there was no Catholic Church at the time of Nicaea. Absolutely not. And the Catholic Church, the word Catholic itself means universal, means this is the only and true way. So it comes down to understanding that the Council of Nicaea proves that there wasn't only one way, that there were many different versions of the idea. But the Council of Nicaea was brought together to bring all the Christians under one banner in the 4th century. So that, you know, Peter being the first pope is absolutely a retroactive commandeering of that story to make the Catholic Church itself. You know, there were disagreements at the Nicene Council about Jeshua's divinity, and the idea, was he man? Was he the Son of God? Was he divine? Was he human? And this threatened church stability. It made the church fractured, and in being fractured, it could not come under one creed. And this Nicene Creed was created to enforce the conformity of one choice, not diversity. Constantine was an interesting fellow because Constantine became so pivotal in Catholicism, but his story is a little murky because one of the things about Constantine is there's this story about him seeing this vision in the sky. But let's talk about that vision for a second. Constantine was on his way to Rome to wipe out another emperor, another military general's army who was holding Rome. So in the conflict, in the battles and the wars, Constantine was going to wipe out another of his own people. It wasn't even the invading force. It was another general who had more power. And on his way there, the story goes that this vision appeared in the sky of the cross with the peace symbol on it, which was, you know, the Roman symbol of Christianity and the divine nature of Jesus. But he claimed to have seen this giant vision in the sky, and supposedly his armies all saw it too. And then they painted that symbol on their shields, and they went and they won. Here's the problem with that story. That's the final story. But there are multiple stories. Earlier visions, Constantine was on his way to Rome, and he stopped at a temple of Apollo. And he went in to pray at Apollo's feet, and Apollo appeared to him and told him he was Apollo on earth. So that was the first story of his vision. The second story of his vision was someone who actually knew Constantine personally, who said that on his way to Rome to wipe out this other general, he had a dream, and in the dream, he was told to put that symbol on his soldiers' shields. And so that dream became this idea. The story of the vision happened much later, and it was a change in the entire story. So there was this conflict between was he a pagan worshiper of Apollo, or was he a Christian? And what he ended up doing was they've kind of commandeered that story to make him this Christian leader and ruler. And at the time of these visions, he wasn't baptized, and he was not in any way, shape, or form Christian. His goal for the Nicene Council was political peace, not theological purity. He was trying to get all the people under one page so that he could then rule them. And his own hand was in the guiding of the orthodoxy of the churches. He was the one putting people together to create this experience. His mother, in this whole process, became one of the first saints of Catholicism, Saint Helena of Constantinople. She's the one who went and found all the holy sites, which many of the holy sites are being proven to not be the holy sites. Even the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, when they actually opened the tomb, went down into the bottom, they found that the oldest thing that they could dated to the time of Constantine's mom in the 4th century. So there was a lot of division in the church. There was a lot of ideas in the church, but Constantine was trying to bring it all together so he could rule it. And the division of the church over Jeshua's nature of man or God, some saw Jesus as created, subordinate to God. Others claimed he was fully divine, equal to the Father. And then there were ones who said he was just a man who had a big spiritual experience. And this simple split created, hugely fierce factions, risking schisms with each other and arguments and fighting. The drafting of a new creed was to bring them all together under one roof and to bring them all together as one idea. And bishops hammered out the carefully chosen language. They literally were trying to figure out a way to put everybody under the same camp. Now, once again, I'm going to reiterate this. In the 4th century, this has nothing to do with the time of Jeshua himself. At the Nicene Council, one of the key phrases that kept coming up was "of the same substance." In other words, we're bringing everything together as one in this one idea. We are coming into agreement, and that agreement was coerced rather than freely embraced. There was punishment for bishops who refused to sign. Constantine was literally a dictator to the theology. And those who dissented were exiled from the empire. They were kicked out of the empire, the Roman Empire, the largest empire in the world at the time. And those who were kicked out, their writings were burned as heresy. It seems that Constantine has erased dissenting voices, and that's the history of the church. Anyone who did not agree at the Nicene Council was kicked out of the entire empire, and any idea of what they said was erased and was burned. We're now looking at the Nicene Creed, written by the bishops who were being ruled by Constantine, being the profession of faith that we have to, as Catholics, we had to lean into, we had to believe, we had to recite every Sunday. But the origin of it has nothing to do with the teachings of Jeshua himself. They chose politics over being present. They chose politics over loving one another. They chose politics over the teachings of Jeshua himself. And why was the creed more powerful than truth? Because it was being enforced by the largest army in the world. The Roman soldiers, the Roman legions, the creed was enforced, and that's why the people who dissented were kicked out of the empire, and their works was burned. Doctrinal unity meant loyalty to Rome, not to Jeshua, and it solved the political fragmentation of the time rather than a need for a spiritual awareness. The kingdom of heaven is within you was taken out of you. At that moment, it became the kingdom of heaven is what we say it is. It's what we choose it to be. And faith was harnessed to stabilize the imperial rule. Constantine's goal of empire stability became the law of the land. And he was formalizing everything under one roof, and then later on claimed that all the history before that was his. The word Catholic being universal. Before the 4th century, there was really no concept of this. And the actual Catholic Church was not even really fully codified, at least the papal line, until almost the 6th or 7th century. And so the concept that Peter was the first pope of the Catholic Church is absolutely a fallacy, because it was not in any of the teachings of the original text, right? Religious disputes spilled into riots and unrest during the time. The creed acted as a tool of social order to bring them all under one roof. Religion became literally a political weapon. The creed was used as a tool of control to bring everyone together as one under one idea. An agreement to that creed became mandatory to remain in the church. If you did not take the creed, you were not allowed to be in the church. Noncompliance meant loss of status or exile, and spirituality was reduced to the rote speaking of words. I believe in one God, the Father, the Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, right? We just started saying those words, not even thinking about where they came from. Heresy was a political category. Heresy meant disloyalty to Rome as much as to God. It gave rulers the justification to silence opponents. Religious dissent equaled rebellion against Rome itself, or against the state. An elimination of competing gospels and voices codified it as this is our truth, this is the only way you can think. Alternative scriptures were labeled as dangerous. Why were they dangerous? Because they went against Rome. The early diversity of Christian thought was crushed. You could not have a different interpretation. But if you know anything about the Bible itself, every book needs to be interpreted, and every book is still being interpreted today by various ideas, and they're marrying their own idea of faith into them. They're not looking at them historically; they're looking at them as, like an apologetist. You look at it, I am literally, filling in gaps with the faith that I've chosen. But the Catholic faith has chosen to fall in line with Rome and the what Constantine's bishop at the Nicene Council created. And that uniformity replaced the creativity and the exploration of what the words truly meant. Joshua spoke of simplicity. The kingdom of heaven is within you. And you look at to contrast the creed formulas with Joshua's teaching, Jesus taught love of God and neighbor and not recited lines. His message was lived fully in the open, not every Sunday morning saying rote words. He didn't memorize text to say repeatedly like affirmations. He literally said, be loving, love one another. That's all I ask. Doctrinal statements distorted his simplicity. The idea of these doctrines, these dogmas, these ideas that Constantine and the Nicene Council enacted took away the very simplicity of love. Joshua never demanded reciting doctrines. He spoke in parables. He invited reflection, not repetition. He emphasized inner transformation over outward confession. To confess outwardly is to go to an authority, to bow down and kneel before them. And you go there and you kneel and then you confess. That's like talking to a cop, right? Faith was shown through action, not formula. Joshua got up, he went to the lepers, he fed the poor, he healed the Roman soldier's daughter. His actions were simply loving. Love and presence was the only creed he ever used. He was just in the now loving. Love became the marker of true discipleship. He told his disciples that they would know him as their followers by the measure of their love.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. Coffee Time with John. This channel runs off coffee, so get your coffee and tea at johnsjoe.com.
Presence with God in the moment is what mattered most to Joshua. Being in the oneness of God and delivering God love to the world. And it required no institutional approval, but the church demanded institutional approval. And there's a danger to defining God in words. Words are imperfect. Language limits what is infinite. Definitions create boxes around the divine. The creed itself shrinks God into human categories. The creed is a barrier to your direct divine experience. People think of that repetition on Sunday morning as, that was their obligation to get that done this week. The rest of the week, they don't even think about it. They don't even focus on it because the creed itself is just the the rote formula of indoctrination that has been pushed into them, but they don't have the meaning. They don't have the idea of the divine is already within you. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Ye are gods. The Nicene Creed and Rome itself took the idea of an individual connection with God away and put it into creeds and councils and Sunday morning masses. My mom had her master's degree in liturgy, and she was head of liturgical doctrine in my Catholic church. So, we were Catholics. I asked my mom one time why she became so Catholic, why she went to Catholicism. She told me she had her first out-of-body experience during a mass. Well, the interesting part about that was she could not speak about that openly within the church because it was a personal encounter with something bigger than herself. My entire family didn't know it until I had that conversation with her, because no one had ever asked her why she became so Catholic. And then so that she could continue belonging to the church, she kind of suppressed it. And faith, especially Roman Catholic faith, becomes about belonging, not about awakening, not about finding that direct connection within. I was really grateful when my mom went to her Irish Catholic priest and said, "Father, I'm concerned. My son had a past life regression. I remember the life of John, the beloved apostle." And the priest looked around and said, "Don't discount it. It might be true." But that goes completely against the Catholic faith, because that's against the ruling. Reincarnation doesn't exist in the Catholic faith, right? But this Catholic priest said it might be true. Faith becomes about belonging to a system, but my mom couldn't speak openly about her spiritual experiences. I speak openly and freely, and I speak my truth because, and in honor of my mom, being able to come out here and speak my truth and tell you the experiences that I've had allows me to feel my direct connection with God. And no words that are said and wrote can replace the experience. But why do Catholics defend the creed? Well, they're loyal to the tradition as identity. Rome has told you this is what you are, and it becomes the identity. And here, thousands of years later, we're still saying it. We don't often realize that we carry these traditions on as habit. Someone sneezes, we say, "God bless you." Why do we say God bless you? Most people don't even know why we say God bless you. Well, that's because in the Middle Ages, they thought when you sneezed, you open your soul to the devil. And the actual original quote was, "May God bless you and the devil miss you." But here we are, 1,500 years later, and we're still saying God bless you because it's habit. We still have this idea that the devil may enter your soul on the subconscious level. We have to say God bless you to someone. Now, today, we think of it solely as just a nicety. But the origins of it go back to this idea that the devil's going to get you, right? And reciting the creed does the same thing. You're just reciting the creed to prove your faith, to prove your truth, so that you won't go to hell. You're literally indoctrinated into the idea that you have to say these words and take this oath every Sunday, right? And Catholics just share in that ritual. They have that experience together, which creates community. Tradition feels safe as it has familiarity. And challenging it feels like you're attacking the community itself. When I first started talking about the book, The Recovering Catholic's Guide to Spirituality, my uncle, a very Catholic guy, was very upset with me for attacking Catholicism. I wasn't attacking Catholicism. I was just bringing out truth and history. His vitriolic anger came at me because he's indoctrinated. He's indoctrinated, and you have to believe what the Catholic Church says. And there is a fear of questioning authority. In all the sessions that I do, I've had a lot of people tell me that when they were kids, they would ask questions and they were made wrong for it. You're not allowed to ask those questions. Why? Because it goes against the authority. To doubt the creed is doubt in the church itself. And the fear of hell keeps you all silent. It keeps you all afraid of burning hell if I don't say the right words. And that obedience is prized over honest seeking. My mom couldn't talk about her out-of-body experience within the church community because some people thought it was the demons trying and the devil trying to sway her away. But my mom was one of the most loving people you ever met. My mom used to do, feed the homeless or the poor and take care of people and never told anybody she did it because she was simply believing in loving and caring. There's a belief in Catholicism that creed, the Nicene Creed equals unity, that we're all stating the same truth. And the leaders of the church will claim it prevents division. In reality, it enforces conformity. Unity becomes uniformity rather than diversity. Many of us have very different experiences spiritually. There's all kinds of different ways. And my mom, God bless her, told me spirituality was a personal journey and gave me the freedom to go release myself from the throes of one belief. That's why there's a green light behind her picture back there, because she gave me the green light to leave Catholicism. And it's interesting that she did so because outsiders are branded as heretics. She gave me the opportunity to go become a heretic. But I love the word heretic. I also love the word blasphemer because they're medieval words. They're not words used today. Heretics and blasphemers are medieval words. That's because the church is still stuck in the Middle Ages and Dante's Inferno and all that stuff. And questioners, anyone who questioned the authority of the church, are excluded from belonging to the community. The Nicene Creed literally creates insiders and outsiders. And the personal stories of those who left creed-based faith is they found freedom. Once they left the idea of leaving the creed behind, they found freedom and they became more joyful, more loving. They started talking to people across the aisles. They became friends with Muslims and everything else because they weren't at conflict anymore. And that freedom, after leaving ritual recitation, is like a breath of fresh air. They exhale, they shut off the fear, they turn off the fear. Former Catholics describe a deeper spirituality outside of the faith because they understand that God is too big and too beautiful to be encompassed by any one school of thought or religion. And the Nicene Creed feels hollow once the present moment inclusiveness and equality is discovered. There is a new way forward. We can live without creeds. We can live without the obedience to a guy from the 4th century. Spirituality can thrive without the formulas. Love is enough to guide your daily life. You can live in love now. I leave you one commandment: love one another. You becoming present is deeper than any doctrine can be because the doctrine has lost its heart. It's just rote words now. And trusting love over formulas gives you the opportunity to experience God directly because God is love. According to the Bible, God is love. And when you live a loving life and you share love with one another, you help that person up on the curb, you hold that door open for somebody, you give them $10 when they're on the side of the road begging. That's love. That's compassion. That's what Joshua did. Love never contradicts itself. It goes out and it acts upon itself. It delivers itself to the rest of the world. Formulas put us in a building, in a room, where we're all saying the same thing over and over again, but it doesn't affect the world. It only affects the people in the room because they're the ones who are indoctrinated and held into the room. Joshua never said go to church on Sunday. Never once. Joshua never said you have to say a creed. Never once. He never said those things. Those are all Roman things. And love remains an eternal truth. Joshua spoke of love consistently and constantly. Presence was the only true doctrine, to be loving now, to love your neighbor. The now is where God was experienced. No creed can replace the present moment because all creed can do is waste the present moment because you're reciting a creed rather than going out and loving. We all can become present. It's accessible to all of us at any time. It's just a matter of letting go of Constantine and all of his Roman rule and all of his struggles and all of his retroactive stealing of Peter's story to create a church. Faith is about a relationship with humanity. It's about loving one another. It's not about the reciting of those words. When you step out of the church and you just live a loving life, your relationships to the world transforms. And ritual becomes almost ridiculous because why would I sit there and be numb and say these words rather than going out and loving one another? And as you start loving one another, you start seeing that love come back to you. Trust replaces the repetition. Life becomes spiritual without labels or definitions. You can't, the church will only show you what it chooses to show you on the track it's put you on. But there's lots of tracks, and all of them have love in them somewhere. I'd like to invite you guys to step beyond the inherited words of Constantine, the rules of the bishops of the Nicene Council, and come back to the place of simply loving. The doctrines, the dogmas, the rules, the rituals have nothing to do with loving. Break free from the fear of questioning them, because that fear is left over from the time of Constantine, from the 4th century. Rediscover that God is beyond that ritual and claim your spiritual freedom by being loving and live a loving life. The ability for you to do this is simple. Look at the history with a critical mind. Understand the reasoning behind certain things. There was no Catholic Church in the 4th century. So why is Peter the first pope? Because it's a retroactive commandeering of his story. The Nicene Council said you have to do all these things, but there were the people who were questioning. Why were they labeled as heretics and thrown out of the Roman Empire? Because they didn't believe what Constantine was pushing. This idea that the Nicene Creed is divine or comes from Jeshua, it's not in history. Jeshua never said it. And if you look at it, I believe in one God, the Father, I believe in his Son. It's because his Son never said it, right? This is a later addition to what you must believe. And if you didn't believe it, boy, were you in trouble. And so, my friends, the Nicene Creed is not divine. The Nicene Creed is a Roman political ruling device to keep you under the roof of his own power, to cage you into an ideology that he can control. And in reality, Jeshua spoke of love and compassion. He never spoke of that. And that's my thought on this. You guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.